Did he say Zion? Does he something Zion
He
thing?
said his name was James.
Oh, he said his name was James?
Yeah.
Well, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought so. What?
Yeah, I don't know. Do you know him? Have you seen him before?
Funny story. I think that's my husband, but I think he's just, I'm serious. I'm married. I've been with this guy for like 10 years.
That
almost.
guy right there?
No, well, it's hard to explain. He's basically like my husband. So there's been like somebody's gotten arrested for impersonating my husband.
Okay.
Anyway, and then recently I went to my apartment and I'm just like I haven't been able to get in. Like I haven't been, that's why I'm like out here most of the time, because we have an apartment and basically what happens is that there's just somebody, it's like they will look like him, but they just like act really erratically, and they'll like be like really violent and really like just like abusive and stuff, and so I can't get there. And so and then recently I went there I went there like 3 days in a row trying to get in, like can I just get a jacket, like something, and like I can't get in, and then I looked at him and like the guy's skin was like turning black, but my husband's not black.
Okay.
My husband is half Japanese and white, and this guy he looked kind of like my husband, but like it looked like makeup was coming off his face almost. And but then the thing is so then where's my real husband, because that guy wasn't there. I mean, that guy was there, but it's like it wasn't my husband.
Sounds confusing.
Right? It is very confusing. And so I'm like been trying to find where my real husband is, because I like have these interactions sometimes where I'm like, is that him? Because it seems like him, or like there's just like some kind of like something where I'm like, there he is, and he's there for like a couple minutes, and then he's like gone again. And so anyway, I like when he pulled up, I was like looking at him, and I'm like, and in my head I'm like, is that you? And he's like, yeah. And then it was like it was him, and then he was gone, and then it was him, and it was gone, and he said his name was James, but he doesn't look like that. It's just the craziest thing. Anyway, so that's why I was like,
gotcha.
But did he say something about a Zion thing? I could have swore he said, did you do the Seattle Zion something?
Asked if I did. There was something that came out on King 5 News about like Seattle's dying. You heard dying would
really?
sound like Zion. And it was just like this very negative view on.
Really? Oh, just like on the whole culture of Seattle or something?
Specifically unhoused people. Yes. But we'll that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But Liliana, thanks for your time.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.
Tell me about yourself. Where were you born and raised?
Yeah. So I'm born in Friday Harbor, Washington. I was raised there. I mean, my parents homeschooled all of us. I mean, I think she had my oldest two brothers. My mom had in school for a little bit, but she just felt like that they kind of weren't getting like the specific attention that they needed in the classroom. Like it just wasn't. She wanted to be able to give them like more individual kind of like attention for their needs, I guess. And so she just kind of ended up homeschooling all of us. Yeah.
Gotcha. There's three people?
5 of us. 5
okay.
kids.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And Dad was around too?
Dad, so he was around. So he was around. He was he was around until I was around when I was 8 years old. I realized that he was like involved in. There was a situation where like one of my neighbors was getting some of my neighbors were getting like sexually molested, and so my dad was involved in a way, and so because of that, being 8 years old, I didn't really know what to do, and so I kind of just like I was trying to protect my friends, and so I told my mom about it, but the whole thing was like a really kind of confusing situation. But anyway, so then at that point, my dad, I think he kind of like wrote a letter to the kids' parents trying to like explain his involvement and all this kind of stuff. And anyway, he ended up going to jail, but he didn't go to jail until like 4 years later. And so that was when I was 12 years old, and so he went to jail. But because of the type of case that it was, he wasn't allowed to live at home after that because I was a minor. Obviously, there's minors in the house, and so he couldn't live in that house because it was just, basically he couldn't have contact with minors for like until he was off of probation, which was like 8 years later or something like that.
What did that feel like for you?
For some reason, I felt like a lot of responsibility because not responsibility for what happened, but responsibility because it was like this, for some reason it was this like really big dilemma for me of like whether or not I should tell people, like why, like should I tell my mom that this stuff happened, or should I, because I didn't know.
Incredibly confusing. It's your dad, who you love, who loves you.
Exactly, and you're scared your parents are going to get a divorce, or like.
Yeah, as an 8-year-old, your mind, your world's ending.
And then the other thing too is that then I have, these friends that are like in it, and I'm, hearing things like, how they're like, they're scared to like change their clothes when they're, at home, and like, but then they're also like having these other situations in their home life that were just like really, heartbreaking situations. And it was like, it was kind of like, I felt this load of like how much was on their shoulders. And it was like, I almost felt like I was adding to that if I did tell, if that makes sense, because I think it was like kind of a situation where they had been, like, it was like they kind of just wanted to like protect themselves, and like because it was some, it was just, unfortunately it was something that was not a one-time thing for those kids. It wasn't, it wasn't an isolated situation, and so it was just it was like they were used to just kind of just wanting it protected and not having to like have that load, sorry, just the traffic keeps distracting me, but not have, you know what I mean? They just kind of would prefer to just like not have to deal with it, if you know what I mean. And so it's kind of a big load to do that, to figure out what to do.
Yes, but that weight is on you,
exactly,
an 8-year-old. And were you talking to anybody about this, or was it just in your own mind?
So I like talked to my brothers and sisters about it. I mean, I debated with it for a long time, like in my own head, and I remember like praying about it, as a kid, and intensely praying about it. And I mean, the only thing that really kept coming to me to do was to just talk to my brothers and sisters about it, because I felt like at least they could be kind of on the same page of like, in a more similar situation to myself. And then, they could also say, yeah, well, we'll just keep it between us for now. And like, it was, but
so stressful.
Yeah. But they just were like, no, I mean, that's just, what I mean? You just, it's like closed case. Like we have to just let them know, but they were like, that's up to you, because we're not the ones that saw anything, and blah, blah. Anyway, so it was
But the point is, so you did, and then 4 years later, your dad went to...
So, but it wasn't until 4 years later, which is so weird. I think maybe because they didn't want to talk about it, is what my understanding is that the kids didn't want to actually talk to the police. And gotcha. So that wasn't until later, which is why it didn't happen until that point.
Eventually they were ready to talk.
Yeah, and so that was when so he only went to jail for 6 months, but like I said, he was on probation, and was a sex offender at that point. So he wasn't at home. So mom was around, and I mean, honestly, I mean, for all other intents and purposes, my dad was a great dad, is a great dad, but it was just, it was a pretty devastating thing, not just for us,
Sure.
Obviously, yeah.
Well, so in Gig Harbor, you said?
Friday Harbor.
Oh, Friday Harbor.
Yeah,
sorry,
San Juan Islands,
Friday Harbor.
Yeah.
I still get this confused. I've been in Seattle for like 25 years.
Yeah, it's the one up north, like more toward, like between here and Bellingham.
Yeah, one of the San Juans. I've been in the San Juans, plenty of times. And your high school, you homeschooled in high school?
Homeschooled, yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then tell me what's happening after high school. What happens?
So I graduated when I was 16, and then got my GED, and then I worked for a couple of years, and then 18 I pretty much just like, I didn't, because there's not even a bridge. I mean, you have to take a ferry to get there, and so I just wanted to live somewhere where there was a bigger city and stuff like that. So I moved out here, like to the Seattle area at 18. And then pretty quick after that, then I decided I wanted to move to Australia. So I went to Australia for a year on like just like a working visa. And then after that I came back, and that's pretty much been like the extent of, I had like good jobs, you know what I mean? Like I had, I worked for AT&T for a long time. I had even at 16, it was like, I was getting jobs as like assistant managers and stuff like that, like really quickly, you know what I mean? I always did well at work, but it was just, so like at age 19, so I could like, right after I moved back from Australia, it had been my boyfriend when I was younger, but it was like my best friend since I was like age 12. So around that same time when my dad went to jail, I made friends with this guy named Jesse, and he was like my best friend. You know, we dated for like all throughout, you know, my whole teenage years. And then so when I got back from Australia, like literally, I mean like a few days after I got back, he died in a flash flood. And that pretty much just like kind of like just really, I mean, we were talking before we start, you know, before is this like, I mean, death is not, it's not something to be taken lightly. It's just what it leaves in its wake, you know what I mean? And the thing is I think people, sometimes, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with like, you know, basically, you know, this whole like resurrection thing and all Armageddon and all this other stuff that like, you know, that my name or who I am is associated with. And like, you know, sometimes these things like they...
Are you talking about what a lot of, well, I guess Christianity teaches, like the religion of resurrection and the end times and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So basically just, I mean, so it's, I'm not sure if you heard, but I mean, basically there was an announcement like from the heavens that it was like official Armageddon had started, and it actually happened twice. And yeah, I mean, I've just had this like this ever-growing relationship with God, and I've done like tons of healing for people, and you know, and actually like resurrections and things like that, which I'm not doing the resurrection, of course, but like, you know, just as a vessel for God. And that sounds crazy, but I mean, the point that I was trying to make with that is that because I do this thing where it's like it's called broadcasting, but it's like it's not on a TV or like anything like that. It's basically just me like praying to God and saying, I want to broadcast this like thing that I'm reading in the Bible or whatever it is, and that has gone. I mean, it's gone out to like, you know, billions and however many other sextillions of people, the point is that basically, like, I feel like sometimes I have been speaking of death or resurrection, and people might feel like I talk about it flippantly, because it's something that I talk about a lot, and I think that I mean, it's difficult to talk about death in a way that isn't. Because you're either talking about death in a way that is as impactful as it really is, or you're talking about it in a way that is flippant. Because otherwise you just don't have what it takes, you know, emotion-wise and energy-wise to be able to talk about like what it really feels like to lose somebody.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously death happens all the time.
Yeah, and it does.
Happen to all of us.
Yeah.
Yet, when somebody who you're really close with dies, obviously it impacts you way more than the stranger. Yeah. But it sounds like this person who died really impacted you at 19.
It did. I mean, it was like, because it was like, so that was, I mean, you can imagine at that age, at age 12, and that was that person, you know, so it was when my dad went to jail, and so that was the person that I was used to going to with all those kinds of things. And so I'm getting back from Australia, and I'm like depressed already because I have really bad seasonal depression. And then, so I'm getting back to like all the gray and all this kind of stuff. And then he passes away. And it's like, and I just felt really displaced when I got back. Like it was like, I don't know.
Did you go back to Seattle? Come to
Seattle?
Yeah,
when I came back to Seattle, it was like, I came back to Seattle, and it was so weird because it was like, I'd only been gone a year, but it was like, I felt like, I don't know, it was like all my groups of friends were like different, and I just felt really displaced. And then, you know, with him dying, and so it was kind of a really weird, really bad time. And I mean, it was horrendous. It was I mean, it's like you just like fall, you know what I mean? You just fall to the ground, and you just
it can be devastating.
Yeah,
sure.
It's like you just feel like you're you feel like the life breath is taken out of you, you know, and so that was really bad. And then, you know, after that, I mean, I was working and stuff for a few years, and then I did fine and everything. I mean, I somewhat like, you know, recovered from that. And then I was dating this other guy, and then he ended up dying from his femoral artery collapsed, and it, you know, I wasn't really in like drugs or anything like that, you know, up until around the time that the second boyfriend died. Like I wasn't, you know what I mean? It wasn't really something that I had been doing, you know, it wasn't anyway, but yeah, his femoral artery collapsed, and so he pretty much just like bled to death in front of me, and that was so now, you know, I'd already had the first death, and then on top of that now I have the second death, but then that was one where you know, you watch somebody bleed to death in front of you, it's pretty scarring. So I mean, it's been, and then since then I've had I mean, what's crazy is that like those things are bad and they're horrible and they're life-changing and life-altering, but I mean, those are, I mean, on the long list of things that have happened in my life. I mean, it's just a very small number. You know what I mean, of things that are like, I mean, it's hard to, yeah, it would be hard to even put down on paper. But yeah, they're really impactful things that have kind of like shaped, you know what I mean, the rest of my, you know, choices and stuff that I've made since then.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, it's at the beginning you were saying that you're married.
Yeah.
And when did you get married?
So I got married March 2nd of 2019. Yeah, so we'd been together for like 5 years at that point. And we've been married for about 5 years now. Yeah, that's been, I mean, he's a beyond, you know, ideal husband. I mean, he's you know, he's everything that I could ask for in a husband. It's just that, I mean, there's basically just things that go on, and it's not just in this city, it's everywhere. So around the time that like COVID happened, and it was around the same time that my husband and I got married, so we had bought a house, and COVID happened and everybody was working from home. And there was just all this stuff happening, like, it was like, I mean, so I was like using drugs on and off, but I was maintaining a job. I mean, I had a really good job, and like, I just kind of was like a functioning addict and like doing whatever, you know, we bought a house, things were like fine as far as all that stuff goes. And, but I just started noticing things being off in our house, and like, you know, just like I'd be at work and like the cameras would be like showing activity, but then like nothing's there when I look at it, or like things moved around in the house and stuff like that. And it just was like, it just kind of, I just knew something was going on. And I mean, for a long time, so I ended up getting shot in the winter of, I guess it was the winter of 2019, December 28th of 2019, I guess.
So COVID happens like at the beginning of 2020. And so
the beginning of 2020? Was it the beginning of 2020?
Yeah, that was COVID, like around January, February.
Okay, so it must have been that I got shot that winter then.
You got shot with a gun?
Yeah, so I got shot in my shoulder right there. It was a 9mm hollow point. So there's still like bits of, you know, metal in my shoulder, but the PTSD from that alone is a lot to function with. But I mean, not to mention I was just like, you know, been beat up and stabbed and raped, and I mean, like literally every bad thing that you can think of. But really the point, I mean, the thing is that it's when you think about those things, it's like, it sounds all so like kind of like, I guess flippant is the word that comes to mind, but it's like there's a storyline that goes with all those things that is much bigger than those things that happened to me, if that makes sense. Because I mean, those things that have happened to me are a story in itself, but the reason why those things are happening is really like the bigger underlying thing. I feel like that that is rarely talked about, and that most people are not aware of. Like with me getting shot, so the reason why I got shot is because basically it was like, so my husband and I ended up selling our house because we were just feeling like, we felt like people were stalking us. Like we kept seeing these like same cars kind of following us around, and like we were noticing like our phones were hacked, and just like, you know, like I said, there was like, things that would be moved around in our house and like just weird stuff happening. Like I would see videos of myself on the internet, like on porn websites that I had zero knowledge of, but like, I had zero consent for. Like I would have a dream about something, and then somehow now I'm seeing a video of myself on the internet that like matches the dream I had.
How did you see the video?
Because my husband found it and showed it to me, and so and it was like you or somebody who looked like you. It was, but I mean that's the thing is it was like,
or you don't know,
debatable. But it was so weird because I would have a dream. That was when it really tripped me out, is when I would have a dream of this like specific thing, and then I would see a video that was like the same dream that I had, but I'd never seen the video.
Yeah, so reality was kind of seems like being distorted,
and that's the thing is that's what everybody's like. Yeah, I mean it
Sounds
must be
like that.
Yeah, it must be the drugs. It must be, you know what I mean. It has to that has to be.
Well, what is your take on?
Well, so basically,
were drugs related?
I mean, so in a sense, drugs were related because I mean, people know that drugs like can open your mind up to other types of like
especially
activity,
mushrooms,
for sure, right?
In a big way.
Yeah,
yes,
for sure. Yeah. So
where you lose a sense of reality, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and then you may be seeing things that are like not, when they're taken out of context, can seem really scary or off, or like, you might be seeing something that's like that you're not,
so
maybe it's a wormhole somewhere else.
Is this real? Is it not real?
Exactly. Yeah. And
what you're talking about.
And that's exactly what I was going through at that time. Is I was going through this like, like where I was hearing like all this stuff about like, oh, the FBI and like, oh, these people are coming in and like raping you. Because there was this other time where I woke up and like my husband was on the ground and I was on the bed, and there was like I had this like horrendous like memory of us having been like tied up and like basically like beaten and like raped and all this stuff, and like we had like rope burns on our wrists, and like we were super out of it. We didn't remember anything, and so we were just having like all these weird experiences where it was, and I was left with like all these huge gaps of time where I couldn't remember things, and so things were just getting really scary, and things were just so scary and so unstable, and so we sold our house, and we were staying in these motels, and we were like literally trying to run from these people because we knew something was happening. Like there seems to be things on our accounts showing up that like activity that we didn't know about, and
all this time you're still holding down jobs?
I for a long time, yeah,
as long
for a long time, and I ended up quitting my job in September. So like COVID was like March, I think, or like the winter.
Yeah.
I ended up quitting my job that September because then I was like thinking that my job was involved, because I just would see all this weird stuff everywhere I went.
What it sounds like, Liliana's paranoia.
And that's exactly what I thought. And that's what I kept thinking, is I was like, am I just like being paranoid? You know what I mean? But
right.
Then it was like, I kept just having like all these things that were proof. But every time I would have proof of something, it would just disappear. Like I would like take a picture, like I would see somebody in my yard. Like I would hear my door and I would see somebody walking out in my yard, and I would take a picture and it would disappear off my phone. And so we sold our house and all this stuff, and then one day my husband was like, saying something, and basically he was just like, Liliana, like we have to figure this out, because if we don't figure this out today, like, it's my last day with you. Like we have to figure this out. And he ended up leaving, and so anyway, so he left, right? And then and then I get this phone call from him, and he's like, I figured out who's stalking us, basically. And, I'm working with the police, and we, they want to know if you want to help catch the guy. And I'm like, yeah, of course, And he doesn't remember making this phone call. He doesn't, like, to this day, like when I bring it up to him, he has no idea what I'm talking about. But I mean, it was a legitimate phone call, and he's like, okay, so, he's like, this might get kind of hairy, just so you know. And I'm like, okay, and I'm like, that's okay. And he's like, okay, so, we'll get in contact. And then later that night, but he wasn't around in person anymore. And so I was like in the shower, and then all of a sudden I heard like kind of like this noise out in the living room, or in the main area. And so I come out, and like the cat's under the bed, and she's like hiding under the bed, and she's like up against the wall, and her hair's on end, and she you could tell that she was pretty freaked out and something was going on. And so I called the police, and the police came, but like, at this point, I'd called the police so many times, like every time I thought there was somebody in the house, or I thought there was somebody in the car, or I thought there was somebody here, there, everywhere, and the police would come, and it kept being the same police, no matter what city I was in. I could be in Linwood, or I could be in Bellevue, or I could be in Seattle, I could be in Redmond. It didn't matter. I was getting the same police every time I called the police. It was the weirdest thing. Anyway, so the police came, and that just like, it being the same police just freaked me out. And so, I left from there, and I was just like, basically, I just didn't know what to do. So I was like, I'm just going to go to a hospital because something's wrong with me. Well, I was driving to the hospital. I just got it in my head that that something was wrong. That, like, because it was unlike my husband to not be calling me, to not be showing up. Like, I knew there had been somebody in my motel room, and so something
told you I need help.
Yeah,
and so you're going to get help at the hospital.
So and that was the thing, is like I would try to get help, but then it was like every time I tried to get help, people pretty much were just like, "You're crazy." You know what I mean? Like, not you're crazy, but like you're high, basically.
Right. They blamed on the drugs.
Yeah, they always.
I guess the question is, we talked about psychedelics. Were you taking psychedelics?
I wasn't taking psychedelics, no. We were doing methamphetamine off and on. But we had done we'd gone to the hospital at one point and done a drug test and found that there was like benzodiazepines and a bunch of other and some other kinds of drugs that were in our system that we had zero knowledge of. And then something called snow. Well, the street name for it is snow, which is largely used to hypnotize people. Literally, it's used in the assistance of hypnotizing people.
Well, and so, that kind of begs the question.
Yeah.
Could that have been a part of those?
Oh, absolutely. It could be a part of because basically what ended up going on. So, I guess there's two parts of what I'm trying to answer right here. One is that, it absolutely attributed to it, because a lot of the activity that I was seeing, I probably would not have noticed had I not been paranoid and not been on methamphetamine. You know what I mean? Because I wouldn't have, because the rest of the time, I'm just kind of ho-hum, you know what I mean? It's just kind of ho-hum, we all just kind of are apathetically going about our day and just doing whatever we're doing, just trying to get by in each moment. But being on methamphetamine, it's like all your senses are heightened, and so you become, acutely aware of every single sound and every single, especially if you're doing a lot, you know what I mean?
Which I can imagine if you're that, aware, alert to every single little detail, it could heighten your sense of,
for sure.
And all of a sudden, paranoia.
And then you pair that with, the fact that when my husband and I got married, that a series of events were triggered. When you pair that with, methamphetamine use, there was, a recipe of stuff there that started happening.
Well, did you make it to the hospital?
So no, I didn't make it to the hospital. I ended up, I basically at that point I started hearing somebody in my head, that sounded like my husband, Lil, you gotta help me, Lil, you gotta help me, Lil, they're gassing me, literally, desperate for help. And so I went to, ended up at this storage unit in Kenmore called People's Storage, and I was hearing that same voice, right? And so I ended up looking in the window, and I could hear the voice as if it was coming out of the window. And anyway, basically what ended up happening was I was just frantically trying to get in, because when I looked in the window, I swore I saw my husband, and it looked like something bad was happening to him. And so my husband and I had gotten guns at this point for protection because of everything that was happening. I think I'm not doing a very good job explaining how much stuff was happening, because it's almost sounding the way I'm making it sound is almost like it was the drugs that made me think stuff was going on, but it was not. There was legitimate stuff going on, and there has been legitimate stuff going on this whole time. But anyway, so I was frantically trying to get in to help him, because I thought that somebody was like using some kind of gas to like either, you know, make him pass out and do something to, or take him somewhere. Or
But was he really in there?
He was not, but he has been. He has been taken. I mean, I told you already that that somebody's been arrested for impersonating him, and that, you know, also that he's been. I mean, I've received ransom note for him before. So at that specific time, to my knowledge, he was not in there.
But at the storage unit, so you went to the storage unit, and you're knocking on a window, thinking he's in there.
Yeah.
But the reality is he was not in there at all.
No, but it was somebody else.
But somebody else was in there.
Yeah. And so anyway, but there was also an apartment on site that the manager lived at, right? So when I took the screen off the window, they set off an alarm. The manager comes out, and he came around the corner with his gun drawn, you know, already, and I had a gun in my bag, but I'm in the frame of mind where like my husband's in there, like somebody's trying to kill him, and now a guy comes around the corner with a gun, and so I was just like, I think he said, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, nothing. Let me get my ID." Like, get my ID? What am I getting my ID for? But it was just all I could think of, because I think that my husband's getting killed basically inside. And I already had, you know, I'd had 2 boyfriends pass away. Plus I'd had another guy that I had been friends with for a long time also pass away during this time. So I had like, you know, kind of a intense kind of fear of like, you know, the men I love passing away. And so that was fueling, of course, what I was feeling. But anyway, I just like bent down, and when I said I was getting my ID, I grabbed, you know, the gun that I had. And when I grabbed that, as soon as I grabbed it, you know, he fired, and that, you know, I woke up handcuffed to a gurney, and
that's how you got shot.
Yeah, so that's how I got shot. But basically, I mean, that was just the beginning of like a long series of events of things that are hard to explain, that were attributed to gang stalking for a long time. Have you heard of that before? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the thing is that when it comes down to it, it's not gang stalking. I mean, it's something so much more than what, but it just comes down to basically like an underground, like it's like a world of, you know, people talk about like the underworld, right, of, you know, crime and stuff like this, and it's not just the underworld of crime. I mean, it's an entire world that exists that has to do with like, you know, people talk about demons and things like that, and they don't think that that's really like real life. You know, they don't think that when they think of demons or like demon possession, they think of The Exorcist. But what people don't realize is that, I mean, we actually, like, every single creation, every single soul that exists has so many spirits inside their body. I mean, inside their mind, you know, within them, attached to their possessions. And just because there's a spirit attached to a possession doesn't mean that like you're going to be, it doesn't mean you're going to be like, you know, that you're going to like put on a certain item and all of a sudden you're going to be like running through the streets screaming about Satan or something. It's not really how that works, but it's, I mean, it just comes down to that there is an entire world of crime, of control, of power and money and things that exist that have to do with like the game, if you've ever heard of the game and stuff like that, that really, like, I mean, the game, you know, whoever plays the game and whoever does stuff, I mean,
you're talking about the movie The Game.
I've seen the movie, but no, there's something called The Game that's literally has to do with like I mean, it's people making bets. I mean, I don't even know, because I don't play the game, but I've been a target of the game for a long time. And basically, when push comes to shove, the things that have happened to me, at least specifically in the last 5 years, but really my whole life, it has to do with the game. Yeah. Because you know, there are people that make bets that have exorbitant amounts of money, and also people that want outcomes for certain things that also have exorbitant amounts of money, and they are able to control. They're able to control your environment to the degree that like you really can't even make your own independent decisions anymore. And it sounds like the kind of thing that's like, you know, like a conspiracy theory, But I mean, conspiracy theories, I mean, if you think about a conspiracy theory, like, well, what is a conspiracy theory? I mean, really, it comes from somewhere, you know what I mean? And it might be a theory, but conspiracies happen all the time.
Yeah,
you know?
Well, I think the hard part with conspiracy theories is there's like truth mixed in with this other
Exactly,
stuff. And it's really confusing, and you're like, oh man, how do I weed through this? And that's where critical thinking comes in. And you're like, you really have to kind of like dig in.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that the storyline of one thing could be so big and weave through so many things that it's like it would take hours or days to actually like sit down and completely unravel. You know what I mean? Like everything that goes into even just like one person's involvement.
Yeah, but I will say, you know, there are different realities.
Oh, for sure.
And, I think for different people there are different realities. And I also think, well, there's more to what we see than that's going on. That this is just a theory, but well, tell me about, you know, your typical right now. What's your current situation?
So my current situation right now is that basically it's like so I'm basically I've had like a lot of so ever since I started pursuing God, basically my relationship with God, really intensely in the last like 2 years. Basically, I mean, I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and I've always had a deep relationship with God. But in the last couple of years, especially like just because of all the things that have been happening, it was like it actually pushed me a lot closer to God because I mean, it's like there's no other hope than like when you're in a situation like that of what I was just talking about, where like you can't even really make your own independent choices because your environment feels so like choreographed by other things going on. It's like you really don't have anything, you know. It's like unless you have God, you really have nothing to turn to, you know. And that sounds like sad that's what pushes us to turn to God, but isn't that the truth? I mean, isn't that always when people
people turn to yes, in crisis people do turn to God, and for all kinds of reasons people believe in God, and for all kinds of reasons people don't believe in God. So
no, I mean, for sure.
But Liliana, what you told me, raped, stabbed, shot, people dying. From my perspective, you've gone through incredible, you know, traumatic events. Several of them. And then I hear the sense of trying to make sense of reality and what's happening.
So, well, I'm trying to remember, what was the question because you just asked me something.
Well, I asked you what your current situation is.
Oh, that's right.
I don't know if you're housed or unhoused.
So I'm not really housed right now because, so basically, I mean, point was, so once I started pursuing God, really, like, it was like all of a sudden, then things really just turned upside down. It was like, you know, I started having this situation at home where it was just like not safe for me to be at home.
With your husband, or?
Yeah, well, so it was like for a long time I thought that it was just that my husband was abusive. I really thought for a long time I was like, I just thought I had an abusive husband, and I thought that I just had to just flee my abusive husband.
Well, why would you think that?
Because I was getting beat up by him. I mean, literally. I mean, I would get beat up by him. But the thing is that you know, I started realizing that like the biggest like giveaway was like my husband's height would change. And I know that sounds so weird, but like his height would change. And so I started realizing that there was like people, you know, basically like impersonating my husband, either in an attempt to like get control of like where we lived and maybe take over our possessions, which is something I've heard people do. I don't really know what the motivation is, but I started noticing that like these men did not see, this was not the same man that my husband is, and I could tell when it was my husband and when it was not my husband. But anyway, so my current situation is that I am still dealing with people that constantly show up where we live and that take over my husband's possessions. Like they basically, it's like they pick up his stuff and somehow like look like my husband, and they walk into our apartment and then they don't allow me in there. And they put holes in the walls and they break stuff and they steal, like, I mean, they've stolen almost everything we own. They have beat me up, they've raped me. I mean, like literally, I've been raped by them, I've been stabbed by them, have all my possessions stolen from them. And I don't know where my husband is.
When was the last time you've seen him?
Like him himself, like physically looking like himself, I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's my current situation, is that
And you're living on the streets.
So right now, yeah, I'm just staying on the street because I don't have, and when I go home, I'm always in the hopes that it will be him there. And he's just like, you know, basically screaming at me with a baseball bat to not let me in the apartment. I mean.
So you don't have to say where it's at, but you have a place that you do go to that you consider home.
Yeah.
But somebody else is in there.
Yeah, and I can't get in there, and I don't have a phone
so,
because they either take my phones or they break them, and I mean it's constant.
Oh.
Yeah, and so I can't get in.
That sounds very confusing.
Yeah, and it's nonstop.
Oh.
Yeah.
Have you sought help?
I have sought help, yeah. And so, like, one time the police actually arrested somebody for impersonating they actually arrested somebody for impersonating my husband. The first few years that I called the police about this thing when it was happening, they just pretty much were just like, you know, you're high, like, you know, like there's no, that's your husband. But like, I'm like, dude, and then finally one day when I called the police, even the neighbors were like, that's not him. Like somebody finally backed me up. They were like, that's not the same guy. Like they told the police, that's not the same guy. And so they arrested that guy, but it just kept happening again after that. And it's like, I mean, the thing is that when they take everything from you, and not to mention, it's like, I get retribution. You know what I mean? I mean, it's not like this is just one person doing this. You know what I mean? It's like, this is an entire like ring of things that and so when you're one person and you're like, you know, like trying to fight back and not just doing what they tell you to do, like there's repercussions for that, you know, I mean, there's, and so it's just, you know, it's just constant. And I mean, thankfully I do have a relationship with God, and I have a really good relationship with God, and that really helps me. But if I was in a position where I didn't have that, I mean, I think in most situations people would just say, if you can't beat them, join them, you know what I mean? And that's just what most people end up doing. Because what are you supposed to do when you're being threatened or your family's lives are being threatened? I mean, it's like, you don't feel like you have much other choice. Yeah. But it's just something I refuse to do.
Liliana, one last question before we wrap up. Is there anything that you'd want the people of Seattle to know?
I think the only thing that I would say I want people to know, and I mean, this isn't even just for the people of Seattle, this is for people everywhere, is just that for all souls, all creation, is just that that things right now seem really either monotonous and boring or just like hopeless, maybe to a lot of people. But I think they know, like deep down in their gut, that even if you don't believe in God, or you think God doesn't care about you, or you think that maybe like God doesn't notice you, like God is noticing and he cares, and this time that we're living in is not a permanent thing. This is this is on a really short time frame now, and like he has promises for us that are beyond our wildest dreams of like where we will be, what things will be like. And no matter how bad things are right now, no matter how bleak they get, no matter how much you feel like that like the world is just like the biggest weight on your shoulders and you can't do it by yourself, you're not by yourself, even if you feel like you are. Even if you look around and there's nobody else there when you walk down the street, he is there, and he does care, and he's doing everything that he can. But things are such a mangled mess that it's like, it's just going to take time for it all to get unraveled exactly the way that it should, in order for every single soul to be taken care of as best as the next single soul. And so to just hold on and to know that like right now, literally, like he is answering prayers in such a huge way and so quickly. It used to be that when you prayed, you did not get an answer and you felt like you had to pray 1,000,000 times to ever even get any kind of progress. I swear, if you say a prayer one time right now and you ask for something that's within God's will, you will see it, for real. And that's like, I mean, if I had anything else to say, that's what's worth saying.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
It's good to hear your voice.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Hey.
You open for a hug?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you.